One more. I'm trying to be clean. 1, 2.
I've got to laugh for miles, 'cause I got hope and smiles. I am an idealist who believes in the world. I believe in choices. I believe in positives. I know we can reverse the crisis of today.
So in your book, Saving the Leader Within, it's wonderful. You share a couple of your own personal experiences as a child and then later as a young woman with the oppression, experiencing societal oppression in particular. And you have a compelling story. I know that you had, in your book, you talk about your experiences in the Detroit Riots. Can you tell our audience about what you experienced and the trauma that came over that experiencing the riots and how that informed you as a leader?
You know, the riot in Detroit was, it was devastating. It was, in fact, there's still evidence of it today on some of the buildings. It's just incredible. I was 18 years old at the time, and I was scheduled to go to Ann Arbor because that's where I was going to start my part-time job, and it was a St. Joseph Mercy Hospital. And when I went to see my friend, who I was going to say goodbye to, I was staying over that night. Well, we heard gunshots, or we thought maybe a car backfired, and we didn't think anything about it because it was the normal course in that particular neighborhood. It wasn't until the next day, and it was like a whole different world. People were riding in convertibles with alcohol saying, free, all of this is free. And at first it was funny, looking at it was funny. It was a little boy that went past us with an empty red wagon, and about an hour or two later came back and it had a little TV in it. It had all types of stuff. And I said, what's going on? And it took a while for us to realize that the riot had started. And I looked down to my left, and the 12th Street was totally up. I mean, it was nothing but fire. I couldn't believe it. It was orange all the way across. And I said, is that fire? Because it was like a wall of fire. And, and then these men were running down the street, and it was organized. Had a box full of, now I know, Molotov cocktails. And they were running, and they started on Linwood, this street we were on, and fires started on there. And the gas station, there were 2 gas stations, one on her corner and one 3 corners over, and they went up. And what happened were the explosions that went off took out a row of brick homes. We're not talking about, we're talking about nice big brick homes. And then we went to try to help. It was this chaos that was everywhere. And then the gas station next to her house went up. Well, we were scared because what happened on the other street could happen there. What really blew my mind is when the paint store exploded. It lifted me up off the ground, and actually, lift me off the ground with a wave of heat. That's what I remember. And I wanted to protect my back of my head as much as possible. And when I went down, that's when I realized we're at war. It was like we were at war. I couldn't believe it.
Right.
Then a little later, the National Guard came, and they were all white. And when they came walking, you could tell they were scared because they heard about the snipers and what have you. We did have snipers. And I remembered, what I remember more is at night when the National Guard shot into our homes. And we were screaming that we were inside. It didn't matter, they were shooting. And because there was a sniper up on the rooftop. And finally, the sniper could hear us screaming. So he realized he needed to do something. And he shot the light out, because that's what they were trying to do, and to hopefully stop them from shooting inside the house that we were in. And finally, he realized that wasn't stopping them. So he went off. We could hear him leaving, crossing the rooftop. And I said, he must be from the neighborhood, because there was no way that he would have known how to get out of her backyard in the dark. Wow. And so it went on like that for like 2 days. And then when the Army came, I remember the Army came the next day because the National Guard couldn't contain it. And it was like, I remember saying to myself, so this is what it's like when those countries felt invaded. You know, the tanks, they had a tank coming down a street, and oh man, it was just, I see it in my mind's eye, and whenever I talk about it, the horror of being in a situation like that, not being able to get away. And I remember that night, by then we didn't have water, electricity, or anything. And that night, I was so disoriented. I thought there was a store that was open, but it wasn't open. It was, I don't know what it was, but I thought it was a store that was open. So I called myself getting off the porch to go to the store to get some water. And not water, because they didn't have bottled water back then, to get something liquid. And the soldier put his gun in my face, and he said if I didn't get back on that porch, he was going to shoot. And I looked at him. I didn't have a gun. I didn't have anything. And I was like 4'11", weighed about 90 pounds or a little under that. And I couldn't figure out how I could be a threat, you know? And that was the first time I ever had a gun put in my face like that. And I remember looking down that barrel, and I'm like, I said, oh my God, this is real. And so I went back to the porch. So that experience for 3 days stayed with me. It stays with me for the rest of my life. I had never, ever been in a situation where I've been shot at, a gun pulled in my face, fire everywhere. I had on started out with a yellow shell. By the time I left, it was black. Yeah, it was black from the soot. And I hear all these stories about what they thought that riot was about and what was going on. And I remember I put it in the book too, of this one article this lady had written. It was a white woman. And I said, how could she say the things that she said? Because whites weren't allowed in the neighborhood. They told all of them to stay away. And to say that this was what was going on, I said, no, that wasn't true. It wasn't true. Not for us, it wasn't. And I remember the anger that I had around it. So there was a lot of, I didn't realize I was traumatized. I didn't realize it at all. And when I went to Ann Arbor, believe it or not, I went 2 days after I got out of there. I couldn't understand how I could be there and not show emotion, not show any evidence that I went through a riot like that. And it wasn't until years later that I realized, when I learned about trauma, that that's what it was for me. It wasn't until the 80s that I learned that I had been in a traumatic situation and I threw all my senses off, you know. So I imagine people coming back from Vietnam and other areas went through, I could see why they went through the terrors that they had in their lives. You know, my cousin ducking under the couch when he heard a backfire, or, you know, I could see why that was going on. So that it didn't start out as a race riot, maybe. It started out more as a civil disturbance that morphed into a race riot. So that is something that I remember a lot. And of course, I left out a lot of stuff because you'd be here all day with me talking about it. So But adaptation, it was very hard to adapt. Well, I must have adapted. I did. I had to adapt in that situation around the gunfire and what have you in order to get through that day. And then the spirituality, oh my God, we were calling on God in every way you could think of, a higher spiritual being to stop what was going on, because we just couldn't believe that. We just couldn't believe that it would go as long as it did.
Right.
Yeah. So that's Detroit.
You were just a little girl. What age were you when that happened?
18.
Oh, so you're 18. Oh, you're 18. So do you remember how the community was after the main incidences died down? You know, when there was control reestablished, how was the community affected?
I left and started living in Ann Arbor.
You left the community after that. That's why you're like, you didn't even know how you could actually keep it together after that. You were just gone.
I was gone. I can say, coming back to visit my family when I could from school, that the Jim Crow was still in effect. Oh. And we had that. Sundown Towns was still in effect. I got stopped several times by police going through Dearborn area at night, and I'm trying to get home. And I had to find other routes because I forgot about the sundown edict. So it was, growing up in a Jim Crow situation, a sundown situation, we were surrounded by those types of towns. It wasn't like there was Dearborn, Melvindale, Ecorse, Lincoln Park. We were surrounded by them. And think about it, it was very frightful. Very hard. So a lot of oppression. We had a community. We were so happy about a community center being developed for us that we couldn't wait to go swimming, but they wouldn't let us swim until after all the white kids swam, and then they would, of course, empty the pool when we were done. Yeah. So. It was pretty rough back there in Detroit, and I hear it's going back. My brother tells me, because he still lives in Detroit, it's going back to that type situation. Yeah, even though there's predominantly Black folks there, because they're having gentrification there. Mm-hmm. Whites are moving back in. Mm-hmm.
And I know gentrification that also causes a lot of segregation, right? And it just seems like that. It seems like even when things had become desegregated after Jim Crow had been dismantled, it's even today, there's a lot of communities where whites and Blacks just self-segregate.
Right, they do.
And where predominantly white communities have these de facto laws, like they're not on the books that there is a sundown law that if you're an African American or person of color, you shouldn't be in this community after a certain time. But we see it in the news with the issues between people of color and law enforcement. We see that there are these de facto laws indeed that we have not clearly overcome the oppression that you witnessed growing up in Detroit.
Right. And the other thing is that they always put it on the South. It happens only in the South. So are you kidding me? Man, it happened in Boston, New York, Seattle, Pennsylvania. Oh my gosh. There were places that you could not go. And the Green Book, which is very true, the Green Book told you where you could stay or sleep,